Welcome to the RAG Podcast, the weekly show where I interview recruitment owners who are prepared to tell their unique story of growth. This is all in aid of helping future and existing recruitment businesses who are looking to do similar things. Now, growth means different things to different people. So by tuning in every week, you're no doubt going to find information that's relevant to you. On this week's episode of the RAG Podcast, I'm joined by James Waissel, who's the CEO and founder of Huntsman Group, a specialist recruitment business headquartered in London, looking into the construction and real estate sector. What I love about this is James is still only 9 months into his business ownership journey. He started in June 2024, backed by some clients who put money in to get him started, and he set himself a modest target of 125,000 his first year. He did over 300,000 in the first 7 months of the business, has since grown to a team of 3, and is really open and honest about the journey to becoming a business owner and what it's been really like in the first 9 months. The pros, the cons, the highs, the lows, managing money, and everything that happens in between. So if you're in the early stage or thinking about launching your business soon, this is the episode for you. Let's get into it. Without further ado, James, welcome to the RAG Podcast.
Cheers, Sean. Thanks for having me.
You've got the recruiter outfit on. You've got the memo.
We're matching today, which is good.
Mate, I think 50% of my episodes since I've been here have been dressed like me, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Good man.
James, people might not know you. You're a relatively new recruitment owner, 6 months, just over 6 months as a founder. And that's one of the reasons I really wanted to do this episode, to like get into the weeds of what it's like in the earliest days. If people don't know you, just give us the quick bird's eye of you, none of the story, just what the business does, where you're based, that kind of stuff, and then we'll tell the story.
Yeah, cool. So launched Huntsman June last year. We predominantly do built environment, so real estate, construction, project management, cost management. Got a small office which is in northwest London, North Finchley area. And yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, and it started off just you. You've already got 3 people now.
Yeah, just me. Hired somebody started in January who's come in to work existing client base to do cost management. Got another person starting on Monday, more operational support. And then we're looking at hopefully another 1 or 2 by the end of this year.
Amazing.
And then we'll go into it a bit later on, I'm sure, about growth strategy, etc.
Well, look, I'm, like I said, I think gone are the days of just interviewing people that have sold and exited and all these stories. I want people to really understand the reality of what it's like to run a business right now. And especially in that first year, I think there's so much to learn from people. But let's go back to before that. So you joined the industry over 10 years ago with the Oyster Group. I know Sasha and the crew. I think you would have been around were you in those offices when we did some of the videos for them years ago?
Probably. So I started in Soho was the office opposite the Glassblower pub.
Right.
Can't remember the actual name of the building. Then we moved from there to Haymarket. And then I left
28,
when the business
what year did you leave?
Was Haymarket. So, this is going back probably, 2017, 2018 is when I left and went travelling for 6 months.
We did some work with them in those years, so you might have just left, I'm not sure, but we did some office.
I remember people coming in and doing videography and stuff like that for the company. So
that could have been us. So what got you into recruitment? Was this something you thought about?
Do you know what?
Intensely?
To not sound cliche,
you fall
into it. My first introduction to what recruitment was I had a job lined up coming out of uni to go into work for a French investment bank doing commodities broking because I'd done an internship with them previously, and it was like, right, I've got the job, don't have to look for a job. And then about a week before my final exams, a good mate of mine in France who I'd met on the internship sent me a news article from the Financial Times going, this particular bank has sold off their entire commodities division to Anglo-American, a big American, business. And I was like, great, what does that mean for me? Very quickly, couldn't get hold of anyone for a switchboard, couldn't get hold of anyone on email.
Wow.
And I was like, I haven't got a job to go to. So I started to apply for jobs online and my phone just went off. And I was like, blimey, that's really quick. Who are these people? And what I then started to understand were I'd been applying for jobs posted by recruitment agencies, not actually by
you didn't even know that
the client. So I was, young and naive coming out of uni going, I have no idea, what a recruiter does.
I did the same thing, yeah.
And my first impression was really bad because people didn't really give me much about what they do or how they would help me. It was just like, bang, here's a list of loads of companies, let's just get your details sent out. What this recruiter failed to mention to those businesses was that I hadn't finished my degree yet.
What were you doing degree-wise?
I did an economics degree.
So what job were you going to the recruiters for?
I was looking at all sorts. I was looking at different broking jobs in foreign exchange, looked at commodities because that's what I'd done. I'd done some previous work experience at UBS in the past. So I thought, right, I want to go into banking, done an economics degree. And then recruitment was one of those things that kind of kept rearing its head. And a very good mate of mine, Jake, who's got his own business with his brother Toby, Jake joined Oyster and was in my ear going, come on, you'd love it, it's a bit of you. And I was like, no, not for me. I'm focused on doing what I want to do type thing. And eventually I caved and said, okay, set up a meeting. And I think I had 2 interviews in 48 hours and then started on the Monday, and that was it.
So you didn't go through a rec to rec to get that?
Had no idea what desk I was going on. Turned up day one.
Was it Sasha that interviewed you then?
No, it was a lady called Tamrin,
right,
who she was the head of the healthcare sort of estates and facilities capital project side. She interviewed me, someone who was involved in the business, who's now a business consultant, Liz Flavel, she interviewed me as well. And then I met the owner, met Dan. Yeah. I think I met Jack as well, because Jack was there at the time. Met Sasha. Did the usual Oyster way of a final interview, end up with a drink, and it was like, right, we like you, do you want to start Monday?
Yeah.
And I was like, look, I've got nothing to lose, don't like it.
Where were you living at the
time? Lived at home with my parents.
Where's that?
Where were we? We were Carpenter's Park, so near Bushy, Watford sort of area.
So you just commuted in?
So yeah, super simple. Got to train with Jake most days because we lived quite close to each other. He was down in Northwood with his parents, and got in first year, absolutely hated it. Couldn't bear it. Was like, what have I signed up for? And I think if Jake hadn't have been in that business, I probably wouldn't be in recruitment.
Yeah, well, I think I was similar in Australia.
He was just like, just persevere with it, it will come. I was dealing with estates and facilities directors in hospitals and going on client visits, and the estates departments are usually in the crypts of a hospital next to a morgue, where I ended up a couple of times by mistake. Wow. And then as time sort of grew, I sort of found my feet with it and realised, right, actually, this is a people's game. You've got to understand your clients, you've got to understand your candidates, and, you start getting involved in more, NHS estates and facilities is actually quite a technical desk, because you're dealing with engineers and people like that, and hospitals are quite complicated buildings. And I think that's probably where my passion for property started to grow, was really understanding, how is this impacting the likes of ourselves, because it's a service, the NHS we use, putting in MRI suites and X-ray machinery and new cancer wards and that type of thing was something that I was like, right, it's good to be involved in this type of thing, because you're having a good impact. And sort of as I went down the line, I stayed there, I think 5 years. My now wife was coming out of university and said, I want to go travelling before I start work. It's time to go. Because if you're not going to go now and go travelling with me, then I'm going for 6 months. You're not going to see me for 6 months. So we worked out a bit of a plan. I actually gave a year's notice. I moved desks to now what I do now, because I sort of looked at it and said, right, I'm going to speak to a few people that are good friends of mine that I've grown up with that are involved in the built environment industry, to really get a gauge for what the recruitment market was like. And all of them were like, look, there's a couple of good people, but there's definitely a gap. So I asked Sasha and the guys that were dealing on the permanent side of Oyster, can I do this for a year? And then let me go travelling for 6 months. When I come back, maybe we'll have a conversation about me rejoining in a sort of different capacity. And, one thing led to another. I felt it was the time to move on. And then
where did you go travelling?
Started in Oz, did a month, Philippines, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam.
You did the opposite way.
Did a couple of days in Thailand, just flying back home because one of my wife's friends was getting married, so we came back for the wedding for I think 4 days, straight out to Colombia.
Wow.
And then did Peru, Bolivia, Argentina, and finished in Brazil.
Amazing.
Best 6 months.
I did the other way around. I did India to Australia through Southeast Asia.
It was very difficult, I think, mentally, because it was like stepping away from, I've worked for 5 years for business, I was earning good money.
You start to struggle when you can just see your budget going down.
Oh, right. I'd earmark.
Do you remember every time I went to a cash machine travelling?
Yeah, and I earmarked the cash that I'd saved up to buy a flat, And then out of nowhere, it was like, I'm now having to try and tell my dad, who's a very old school sort of entrepreneur, businessman, why are you doing that and spending money travelling for 6 months going on a jolly, basically? And I said, believe you me, it'll be great for me to do that, because I'm at that point in life where actually,
how old were you at the time?
Love culture. I think I'm 35 in a minute, so I was sort of mid-20s, mid to late 20s. And I was like, now's the time for me. I haven't got the responsibility of kids. I'm not married. Got an opportunity of going and really, deep diving into culture. And I needed it. It was a quite intense 5-year period. And I was like, I need that sort of reflection point of what's next for me. What do I want to go and do? And obviously had a bit of a taste of a different market, and was like, I've now got to start thinking about a bit of an action plan. And then 3 days before I flew to Australia, a rec called me up, who I'd been speaking to for years, who was just really, really sort of genuine.
Yeah.
And she said, there's a business looking to open an office in London. They're based out in Singapore. Do you want to have a chat with the owner? And I said, look, yes, but I'm going away for 6 months. So as long as it's not, I need you to start next week, we'll have a conversation. So that was when Archer came on the scene for me. And it was that next step for me of being involved in a bit more of a strategic role, growing out an office, looking at how do we diversify with our clients. And
so what happened then? Did you go travelling and then you locked that in that when you get back, you'll start?
So I had the first interview for about 2.5 hours the day before I flew out to Oz. And I basically said, look, let's keep in touch.
Did you see him in Singapore or anything?
No, we did a video call. And then when I came back for that week, I had to do a business plan pitch to him that I wrote on a night bus in Vietnam on my iPhone. And that was just, that's when you start thinking, actually, my skill set is not just delivery. I know what my path is going to look like now. And we had
Did you know you'd own your own business eventually?
100%.
Yeah, but you thought, I'll
100%.
learn how to do this on someone else's money.
Look, I've grown up in a very entrepreneurial family. My dad had a family business in food import and distribution for 27 years. My mum had an au pair agency and then a fashion business. Both my sisters worked for themselves. For me, it's not that sort of cliche of I knew I always wanted to be my own boss, but I've always been in business from the age of 5.
Yeah.
Flogging Pokemon cards out my mum's boot at school. That for me was where that sort of, I'm always one to turn my hand and make money. Doesn't matter what it is. If there's a margin in it, I'll get involved in it.
Yeah.
To a certain degree. So, I always knew eventually at some point I'd either be at the table of equity within a business.
Was that what you were thinking when you took that Archer role?
Yeah, I mean, when I joined, it wasn't the right time for me to take that route, because I was 1.5 years experienced in that market. I didn't have 7 or 8 years behind me, so I was still finding my feet a little bit. And I thought to myself, look, if I'm going in as a sort of divisional manager, or whatever you want to call it, head of office, I've got the opportunity to sort of understand a bit more about how a recruitment business works. Unfortunately, after 5 years, I'm not really learning about the business side of recruitment. I'm still very transactional, business development focused, the face of the company in London.
What did you build up in that team?
I think at peak we had 7 people, and then we were doing really well, and then COVID happened, and I was quite fortunate to be dealing with a client that was quite heavily involved with Amazon in building their last mile distribution facilities up and down the UK. And out of nowhere, it was like, no one's hiring. And then I get a phone call, we need a team of project managers. And that was very fortunate for me that I felt, and this is not an arrogance thing, I think had that have not come in that relationship not been there, we would have been in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Because there'd been no foresight of fees. We had a couple of deals, quite big deals, fall out very quickly when COVID happened, to people that had just started jobs in new companies. And it was, you're on the phone trying to retain a relationship with a client, but also say, look, we've done our job, we're contingent, we've invoiced you, it's not really our fault that there's been a global pandemic, so you're now asking us to refund you 80-90% of a fee value. And I'm sat there going, right, everyone's been put on furlough. I was pulled into a room and asked to take quite a significant pay cut, which I did at the time, because my bigger picture was, I'm a genuine person, I'm trying to help a business, I understand where the business is struggling, potentially financially, and I've got to look at a medium to long-term play here, that if I don't agree to a pay cut, this could go pop at any minute, and then I'm back to square one, zero. So we came out of COVID, we tried to build a little bit, and then in my mind it was like, right, I've got to start thinking about the future. Got engaged, got married, planned a wedding, which was great, and then you start thinking about, I want to buy a house, I want to have kids. How do I do that in today's day and age if I can't see the massive expansion of a business? And not everyone as a business owner has got that aspiration to grow into a big business.
How was it running a business for someone in Singapore? Was that?
They actually moved to the UK sort of halfway through my tenure. So the first sort of year to 18 months was a bit odd because it was like, you've kind of left me to my own devices, which was good in certain aspects. The other side to it for me was a bit like, well, where's the direction? I don't really know you as a business owner. And I work best when I've built a relationship with somebody and understand, what's your end goal for the company? How do I align with that? How do then my staff who work with me, that I'm training and developing, form part of that structure to have a really core spine? Because that's super important. You need your core spine of people to then build around them, and you've got your security and you're diversifying and leveraging risk in different markets, or you might, bring in a temp person to try and open up a temp business. And yeah, it was, look, I learned a huge amount, but it got to a point where I stopped learning, and I was like, look, the only way I'm going to get what I want is if I do this myself, and I dropped myself in the deep end. I back myself in terms of relationships with the clients that we work with. And I sort of sat there and was like, right, I now need to learn about how to run a business and how to run a recruitment business. And that was a really interesting sort of first few months post-exit, because I was like,
so when did you make the decision you were going to start your own business then? What was it?
Probably the morning after my wedding.
When was
Sat
that?
there in bed.
When was that?
June 23. So
a year before you started.
So I had a conversation with my wife, because she's the boss, like most of them are. And I said, look, this is what I've got to go and do. And she said, you've been talking about this for too long. You need to go and do it. I'm sick of you talking about it. You've got to action it. But obviously, financially, I was encumbered with a wedding. And I was like, right, I don't want to leave us in a difficult predicament. So I'm fortunate to have some good people in my network, a couple of people that are financial advisors. I said, look, this is where I'm at. Where do I need to get to? That if everything goes Pete Tong, I've got a full out plan. That I'm not going to lose my house and all those sorts of things in terms of collateral, because I've seen that happen. My dad exited a business, set up another business. The business went into liquidation. We lost the house as a family.
Wow.
So, I've seen the dark sides of having your own business. And the pressure and the strain and the stress.
Was that as you were growing up?
Yeah. I was, how old was I at the time? 17. Because I remember someone knocking on the door trying to take my car off the drive as a payment for a debt on the business. And I said, well, hang on a minute, the car belongs to me, not my dad. But through all of those experiences, you learn. And
Did you actually move house then? Yeah.
Yeah, had to move out. It was a difficult time because, as kids, I'm the youngest of three. All three of us, very fortunately, were privately educated. Given the best upbringing that we could be given by our parents. And you get very used to going on nice holidays, and you're in a private school, and, you're rubbing shoulders with people of a certain ilk, and not say it's a status thing, but it's, I've seen the niceties of life, but also seen the complete other end of the spectrum of, your mum and dad can't afford to pay for food at a checkout, and they're supporting three kids that are all still at home. And it makes you, it toughens you up a little bit to realise you've really got to be smart about how you go about things. Yes, obviously, in certain business settings, you've got to be comfortable with risk, but calculated risk.
Yeah. So when you after you got married, you said, right, you spoke to people. What was the number or whatever that you had to figure out to say, right, that led to a year?
Well, it was I had the conversation with my old MD before I got married and basically said, I'm not happy.
Yeah.
Like most people do when they're happy to have an uncomfortable conversation. I said, look, I can't really talk about this now. I've got enough on my plate. I'm getting married in a couple of weeks overseas. But when I'm back, I'd like to sit down because I've got to think about my future. Very quickly, it fell on a bit of deaf ears. So I was like, right, no meeting in the diary. I've given someone 5 years of my time and the effort, and 120% through that 5 years, there's nothing in my diary. So
Did they just underestimate how serious you were?
I think A, that, and B, truthfully, I just don't think there ever was a plan. I think the business was very much a lifestyle company, which is fine. Some recruitment business owners want a lifestyle business. I'm not going to resent people for that. But transparency and honesty is the most important thing to me. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. I'm okay with that. But my aspirations were a lot bigger than that. So that immediate for me was like, right, I'm out. How do I recoup some cash in quite quickly? Well, let's start dealing with immediate and 1 month notice period candidates, because I'll get invoices out quicker. So I sort of stepped down from the more senior level roles.
Just while still working?
Yeah.
So you didn't even quit or anything?
Came up with a strategy plan in my head of how.
You didn't quit. You just thought, I'm going to work a different way.
How am I going to get out? Immediate candidates, 1 month notice period. No, I'm going to get the commissions paid to me. Was very fortunate that some of my very inner circle clients knew what was going on, so they would pay invoices very quickly, which was to the benefit of the business because they were getting paid quickly. But they knew I was going to get what I needed to be able to exit.
That shows a decent kind of client-led relationship.
So I was subsequently approached by two guys not in my circle of real estate, got a finance business in terms of recruitment, both in the UK and also out in the UAE. And we were talking, and they, completely out of the blue, cold approach to me and said, look, this is what we want to do. We've got some relationships out in Dubai, and we've also got relationships in London with some of our clients that have got real estate and construction arms to them. Let's have a chat. Fine. Had a chat. Fast forward, a couple of meetings. We've got a deal. I'm sat there going, right, I'm a week away from the end of, when was it, September? I'm going to resign.
2023.
2023, I'm going to resign. Get an email 2 days before I'm about to resign. Financial markets tanked. We've not had the best outcome that we'd like. We feel a little bit vulnerable in terms of making this level of investment of somebody. That was it.
Sounds like when you started that French job,
right?
Doesn't it?
And I'm going...
Have you actually resigned?
I've psyched myself up to resign.
But you haven't done it yet?
I've written the letter of resignation. I know my action plan. And now I'm like, right, I've got a problem. And very fortunately, I'm not going to mention this company's name or the individual. They know who they are, and I'm sure they'll watch this. But that morning, I was supposed to be meeting a client, and we'd done a lot of work together, and they took one look at me and said, what's wrong? We're not talking about recruitment. We're not talking business. Just James, what's wrong? What's up? Yeah. Your face says it all pretty much. And I'm quite an emotive person. I'm terrible at poker face. And I explained the situation, and basically by the end of that meeting, it was send me a business plan and how much do you need? Because I back you to start. So you kind of sit there and go, blimey, wasn't expecting this.
This is a non-recruitment. This is a
non-recruitment
focused company.
People that I've helped to scale their business, that built a relationship up over sort of 4 or 5 years. And I was sat there going, blimey, really sort of taken aback by it, because that's sort of that pat on the back to say you've done something right, in your career. You're doing a good, genuine job for your clients and working hard for them. And I really saw the leverage to how it could work, because didn't really need another recruiter person backing me to tell me how to do recruitment. I know the industry. I've done it for 10 years. What I wanted to know was, how do you run a business? How do you scale a business? How do you be smart with how you operate in a business environment? And that mentorship and still client relationship, because that's still a good client of mine today in Huntsman's business, really gave me the pedestal really to sort of push on. So I'd had that full roller coaster emotion of, I'm putting myself in a candidate's shoes here of, you've got a recruiter telling you you're going to get an offer, the offer doesn't come, then someone else comes out of the blue direct and offers you the absolute dream scenario. And then I was like, right, we're good to go. We had a couple of meetings. He's got a business partner, this chap, and had a couple of meetings with them, talked through the business plan. They said, right, yeah, we're good to go. It was very, very simple. And as most people know, startup costs to start a recruitment company are not very high. So we agreed on a deal. where, you know, they'd come up with sort of the capital to help me effectively pay my way and give me a little bit of comfort that I wasn't sort of sat there going, God, you know, I can't fill the fridge with food, I can't pay my mortgage, and, you know, can't live. But I was also very humble with it and didn't take the mickey.
Why did it wait till June then?
So I then resigned in Halloween, October 31st, because I was waiting for a big commission check to come to me. So it's like, that comes in. And so that took us to November. And I had a 6-month restriction in my contract. And I sort of sat there and said, look, one of the things that I learned in COVID is that you never get free time. So when you're go, your systems need to be on point. So I took that sort of strategic viewpoint of I've got to build the best systems over a 6-month period before a launch. Because I know that when I'm one of one and I've got no additional support around me and I'm in the thick of it, you know, of the transaction side of recruitment, if I'm not prepared for this could have huge detrimental impact to the business very early days. I also wanted to do a bit of fact finding, going out, getting an understanding of what do you need to do. And that was something that for me was non-existent online.
So you spent 6 months?
Right. So I spent 6 months. I built a database. I built LinkedIn Recruiter back-ended into my database so that the entire industry I recruit into is mapped, company by company, mirrored onto the database, understanding, you know, the entire market, using LinkedIn Analytics. Obviously, the fact that I'm on your podcast now, speaking to yourself, understanding more about LinkedIn and LinkedIn utilization and the best strategy of building a personal brand out. Because for me, this isn't about growing a business that funds a lifestyle. It's about growing a successful recruitment business that's got core fundamentals set in stone that allows you to grow and succeed with minimizing risk as a business owner. And if I can do that and look back in 5 years' time.
So did that money they gave you give you the 6 month, or did you already have the money for that?
Look, I had money aside from what I do outside of the world of recruitment and bought a collection of trains, you know, and drove up to Wales in December, bought the whole lot back. You know, set up a train set in my flat and my wife went mad. So what's this? And how long is this going to be out for?
You sold it, didn't you?
Sold the whole lot. Helped to create
how much money did you
some
make,
funds, about 15 grand.
On a train set?
It was a parcel of trains that I bought, you know, made the money, and, you know, that went into the business. Plus, you know, because, you know, you're walking away from a good 6 figures and being very comfortable to zero.
Do you know what? I remember when I started my business, it's funny because me and my ex, she was never actually going to do it, but we talked about going traveling just at the time of quitting. And it was like, go and burn the covenant away in Asia or whatever. We didn't do it, but I really was excited by the prospect of having a break and having a bit of time out. But then as soon as I quit, I couldn't even the garden leave. I was sat on my fucking hands, like I need to do something. And it's probably why we ended up building the media business, because we were like, there's no covenant here, go. So how did you did you find that 6 months?
Well, yeah, like I say, you know, Christmas time, recruitment industry's quiet. Yeah. You know, I was like, use that time to get a bit of cash in, do what I need to do with the trains, got them all, did all the, you know, everything, wrapping and packing, cleaning, running them, testing them.
I don't think people really understand. I have no idea.
Fixing them. I mean, these are from like 1950s, 1960s.
Is this something you knew about anyway? Like,
yeah, my dad now is he's full-time antique toy specialist. So I've grown up with it, going to toy fairs as a kid.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it.
So, you know, he was at one point, probably still is, you know, one of the biggest dealers of Meccano, you know, in the world.
So you could go and buy an old train set, so I can go, and sell it for decent money.
You know, it's like anything, it's volume. If someone sells a big, you know, bundle in one lot, a collector doesn't want the other 150 items in that lot, they want one. So you buy it, you split the whole lot up, and you sell things individually and you create value. And I've been doing that ever since I was 5-6 years old. You know, was buying in bulk, splitting it down, selling individually, make a margin, you know, reinvest the cash. So, you know, I said to myself, whilst I've got this 6 month restriction, what can I do? Well, I can put the fundamentals in place to get ready, to know that I'm going to be ready. You know, I'm not going to upset the person that I've worked for, because away from business, really nice guy.
Yeah.
You know, got that level of respect for people and I'm a believer in karma.
I agree.
You know, I'm not going to go out day one calling all my old clients because they're not stupid. The person who I've worked for 5 years is also not stupid. And as a matter of respect to that individual, I was like, look, I also want to really go about this in a more considered way of how to set the business up, like I say, to give me the foundations. That lasted about 2 months because one of my wife's old school friend's brother worked for a development business in central London, and I saw them post something on LinkedIn going they're looking for a development manager. So I called him up and said, Freddie, can you help me out? I can't touch my old clients, but you are not part of that client base. Can you help me get in there? Sure. Within half an hour, get a phone call from head of development. Yeah, you know, let's do some business together. And that was effectively my first placement.
But that was before you started?
Yeah, before I started. So I was like, great.
Bit of money in
I know that when I launch come June, that person I think started in April. In the April, invoice went out. I was actually in the airport flying out to a stag do at the time by myself because I was joining late.
Yeah.
You know, sat in the airport and I was like, right, I've done my first deal. I'm going to go and just treat myself to a beer, you know, and just sit there and go, right, this is a bit real now. You know, you've established your business, you've set it up, you brought in a new client, you've done a deal. Great. Let's just crack on with it. So officially we launched in June. Because that was the end of May was the end of the restricted period. And I haven't looked back. It's been a lot of learning because I think anyone who's coming into the recruitment industry who is looking to set up a business, who's not worked at a very sort of senior level in a business where they've been involved in the operational side and more of the sort of, you know, not the business end, but all the back office side, you know, there is hardly any information online. You know, I didn't know what I needed to be registered for GDPR. I didn't know what I could do, what I couldn't do, what PI and PL insurance I needed, you know, and I kind of sat there and said, you know, you only learn by speaking to people that have gone through similar things. So again, you know, I utilise speaking to a lot of people in my network to say, I want to make sure I'm compliant because I don't want to get a slap on the wrist before I've started.
I'm interrupting today's episode to talk about our sponsor, Atlas, the only AI-first recruitment platform on the market. Now, imagine you had a genuine assistant following you around, listening to everything you said on the phone or in meetings, and then doing all the admin for you that you don't want to do. Well, that is actually possible now through Atlas CRM. It's the only platform with fully integrated AI, so there's no note-taking whatsoever and no need to buy any additional software. Now, they've got so many amazing features, specifically customize and integrate this platform easily, okay? They've got templates that can be adjusted to fit any document requirement and integrate seamlessly across Atlas platform for easy recall. Okay, so Atlas is brand new to the market and launching so rapidly. For the first 200 members, they are offering what's called a founder's license, okay? And the founder's license is going to be a 40% discount for life. Okay, and it's only for the first 200. Now, if you want to be in the first 200, you're listening to this episode through the RAG, you're going to have a great chance. Go to www.recruitwithatlas.com/the RAG and sign up on that page. All right, let's get back to the show.
What did you set yourself as a target for the first year?
About 125 grand.
You did more than that in 6 months, right?
It was for a 9-month period that I sort of set that target out, and I think we finished on about nearly 300k.
Yeah.
In a difficult market as well, you know, property has been not as buoyant as what it was when we came out of COVID for sort of like a year and a half, 2 years. But again, I think it's probably the DNA that I have of being able to wheel and deal and not just be too concentrated on working with one type of client that allowed me to hit those numbers. And then immediately it was like, right, I'm now starting to get clients asking me to service other functions of their business. I need to identify someone. And that's where Claudine came in to the company, you know, someone that I'd known of for a long time. There's people that we know in common away from recruitment. And ultimately it was, you know, there's a lot of similarities. She spent many years in broking, in banking before she got into the recruitment world, which is where I was going to start my sort of career, and it didn't quite happen. You know, the client bases that we dealt with very closely aligned. So again, it was like you're going from a 180 structure of just doing resourcing to into a 360 role. That's your baby. I'm going to help support you with the growth of it, but you're far better than just being a resourcer. Another person starting Monday who's more operational, because that's something that I've identified pretty quickly is a big part of running a business. There's a lot of admin, there's a lot of ops, there's a lot of marketing. You know, we want to make sure we're consistent with our brand.
So why did you buy the bootcamp? Because you brought in, after a couple of months, you're really early days. Like, we get a lot of people doing that. But
I looked at it and I thought, I've done a LinkedIn exam ages ago where I went into some office, I think in Stratford.
Right.
And it was all very generic. And I've always sort of been very quick to identify where my weaknesses are. And LinkedIn was one of those things where I kind of sat there and said, there must be better optimization of it, but I'm not aware of that. And, you know, Jake and Toby had worked with yourself, and I knew a few other people, and they're like, it gets you thinking very differently. You know, it's not overly complicated what's actually being delivered. Number one is consistency, but it's also about, you don't always have to post waffle.
No.
You've got to know how to structure what you're saying properly so that people are engaging with that, and your bigger picture is building an audience that you can then monetize. It's not just about you putting out socials going, I've had this for breakfast this morning.
No, it's not.
Do you like my picture of egg and bacon, right?
That's what people
You
think.
know,
They see like dog pictures and all this, and they're like, oh, I don't want to do that.
It's all about value add.
Yeah.
And I think one of the big things for me where I've sort of already seen benefit is, you know, more and more people now are saying, I really like your content on LinkedIn. I find it really useful what I'm seeing. It resonates. You know, you're putting out content that actually, I read it on the way into work and I'm going, that is me. So that's why I've reached out to you. You know, I think the last 2 or 3 placements that I've made have come from.
So what has been the impact then?
I put something on LinkedIn. Someone's come to me.
If you had to quantify the impact, what would you think it'd be?
In terms of value, probably immediate book value, probably about 50, 60 grand in fees.
That's like 3.5 months.
You know, in terms of bigger picture, it's opened the doors up to some people that, if we are to be successful working with them, you're talking businesses spending £2-3 million a year on recruitment fees.
Yeah.
You know, but these are the people at the top. These are not,
Yeah.
you know, the junior folk that sit within these companies. It's allowing me to have that level of conversation that talks more about business strategy, because that's what I enjoy.
The bit that I love about working with people like you is, I think you've, based on people listening to this will understand, you've already got the skills offline. You're very capable, right? You're wheeling, dealing, you're building business.
Yeah.
One of your clients invested in you to start the company, right? I'm not getting involved at that level. Like, you already have those skills. So what I want to do is work with people like you and take you online, because if you're already doing well anyway, you've already got the knowledge, you've already got the network, you've already got the insights. Taking that online gives you a whole new opportunity to be, it just opens you up to a whole new world. Taking people who don't know shit about recruitment online is not the game. That's not what I'm into. Or not very good at it. Like, it's about, this is not a silver bullet to solve it. If you can't recruit, you can't recruit. Like,
no, but do you know what? It's funny because you meet a lot of people, and you meet a lot of people that think they know how to run a business and they don't. And they're probably much better off sat working for somebody else. And, you know, you see a lot of statistics about X amount of businesses in recruitment that startups fail within the first year. I'm not surprised, because it is complicated, but you've also got to know where your weaknesses are, and then you've got to do something about it. You know, I did that with yourself, with LinkedIn. Would I say I was particularly weak on LinkedIn? Not horrendous, but I definitely wasn't getting maximum return out of that platform.
No, but you went, I could sit here and figure it out, or I can just hack the knowledge of that guy and that team.
Yeah.
And in 3 months, you know, you've got 10x ROI, and you've got a process that's taking you to the next level. Smart investment.
100%. And then it was, right, I've now got an issue with the ops and the admin side. Well, what do I do?
We go and find someone.
We go and find someone.
We're going to get someone in South Africa. Keep costs
Excellent.
down.
Great. Then off the back of that is, I'm with a client yesterday who I know is open to hiring South African nationals, who I said, I've actually got someone who's going to be based in Cape Town that can pre-screen all of the candidates that want to move to the UK. Fantastic. When can you get me CVs?
Wow. So our
So-
introduction to the South African model, which comes from Hoxo, you work with Tanya.
Yeah.
We've built everything there. You've not only cut costs and got a great
I'm going to
person.
go and open an office there properly.
Mate.
My wife would go, come on, let's go and live in South
So
Africa.
now you're gonna No, I mean, you move quick, mate. That's what I'd say.
But I think you've got to be, look, you've got to be sensible with what you're investing, because you've also got to live, and you've got to draw money out of a company, which in itself, with, not to get political, not as easy as what it once was, not as fruitful in the UK system as what it once was. You've got to retain a certain level of profit, and you've got to earmark it for investment. And you've really got to make those decisions quite quickly. And I think that's probably where I've got very comfortable quite quickly making a quick decision. You know, look, if you don't try, you're never going to know the impact.
But what you did, though, is you went 6 months, you know, you set yourself a really... I get the 125 in year one. I think that's a really sensible target. But for most people, they blow it out the water, I've noticed. Yeah. But you did. You blew it out the water in 6 months. You then, you know, you worked with us to hijack the best way to get you out there on your own. And then you've quickly put a couple of people around you to put a bit of process and scale in. Super smart. So where does the next phase go?
We're looking at different verticals within real estate, because the more I'm speaking to different people in different corners of the real estate world, very closely you start understanding the synergies of what services lead into each other. So we have a couple of different options. One is to go down the model of, I go and bring in somebody who is an expert or a market leader in a particular market that is not a business owner, that again may have a similar circumstance to myself, very comfortable working in a company, but can't really see how they're going to get to that next level up. You know, where I come in with that is, I can offer you something that is going to involve part ownership, and I'm going to back you, and I'm going to give you the tools, and I understand your industry, and I understand where the value add comes from in terms, of our growth model. And I think working with the people that were involved with the investment with myself to start off with, you know, they've adopted something quite similar in their own business away from recruitment that's worked extremely well, that really does buy in people, to give people leverage to have a form of ownership of what they're building.
It's like a partner network.
Right? So it is like a partner network. You know, it's something that a lot of people would always say to me, oh, you're never going to get equity in a recruitment business working for someone else. And I was like, that's really interesting. I think the only ones that I knew that I'd ever spoken to were Investigo, that had some form of like EMI scheme. But
there's plenty of them out there, you know, but not all.
You know, very, very few people would give but also, again, it's like, what does that mean to you? Is it you want it for profit share because you want a return each year, or is it you want a piece of the pie because you're growing something with an exit strategy, right, where you actually make a big lump of money? You know, and I think people's view on it, even when I deal with candidates in the industry, we talk about equity, it's like, what does that actually mean to you? You know, some people don't want that responsibility, obviously, of the ownership of a business, but they still want to be given a very good opportunity to have a part of something. And that's possibly where we're looking at one or two individuals to come in to supplement closely what we've got already. So yeah, looking at the structure of the business and looking at how the investors into the company before they actually exited when I launched the company, so actually no longer involved in it, they've got a model themselves that really promotes a very clear path for growth for certain individuals to have an ownership piece. So, you know, that's how I want to look at the business.
So would you have like the current business and then have like subsidiaries that people have a share in?
So, you know, a head of a department would effectively be their own mini business.
I think that's just so sensible.
With a P&L responsibility. If I look at the more successful businesses in the industry I recruit into, they're LLPs, you know, and they have a whole meritocratic environment where you work hard, you work your way up, then you're invited to sit as part of the partnership. And that's what incentivizes the right people, because look, not everyone can be at that level. You've got to have people that are steady eddies, right? Not to say anything away from those people, but they're never going to have the aspirations.
But they're going to struggle in
top.
But they're going to struggle in the future.
But they're going to need to help support the business, because you do need those people in there. The other part of it is to look at people who have got some experience in recruitment, probably 18 to 24 months under their belt, to come in to work with the likes of myself on the market that I specialise in, and with Claudine in what she specialises in. But the hardest part of it is there aren't many good recruiters out there. So that's your biggest obstacle in terms of growth. Do we want to approach the academy route? Absolutely not.
No.
You know, do I want the responsibility of 6 people joining and within 3 months, 4 out of the 6 are no longer there, and then 9 months down the line, 1 out of the remaining 2's gone, and then you're left with 1 who's worked out? No, because it's very time consuming. We haven't got the capacity for it as a business, and also I don't think it's the right model.
I think if you can create niches that are lean, that are all, like you say, partner network model, that you're protected. You know, the big companies are struggling now because the industry's getting squeezed. AI and automation's coming in. Things are going to cut. There's loads of jobs won't exist. There'll be loads of new jobs. It's going to be a net positive market for jobs, but every sector's going to be affected. So if you're nice and lean in the right places,
and I think the biggest thing
you can be agile.
Where AI will not ever be able to do what a human does is from the emotional side. And from the buy-in of a client and the buy-in of a candidate. It can do all the pre-screening, it can give all the questions and answers and the filtering element, but it's never going to have that human side to it right now. It might do in 3 or 4 years' time with the amount of time that it, you know, how quickly it's progressing. I look at it and I go, how are you building a relationship as a computer software? Right? Where does the emotional side come in? Real estate as an industry is pretty old school. It's one of the traditional construction is, you know, very traditional. Real estate is very traditional in London, and up and down the country and across the world. It's like a very traditional sort of industry. People like dealing with people. People like having a drink in the pub and talking about work. You know, you're not going to get that through AI. However, it's how do we then, as a recruitment business, bring in and adopt an AI strategy to get rid of or supplement all of the menial tasks that happen to allow the people in the business to do what I would call the human side of recruitment.
But there's AI agents coming. I was literally listening with a client with one yesterday where the human voices, like this guy's had his sister do the voiceover that sounds exactly like his sister. They're not lying to candidates. They're saying they're open that they're AI, but they're just so realistic. It's unbelievable. Making 400 outbound calls a day, not missing a single beat. Everything's updated in your database, coded perfectly. Booking calls for you.
Yeah.
Once they hit a certain criteria. And so the human, the influence, the relationship remains with the person like you, but the legwork to have a diary full of the right calls is done.
100, yeah.
I mean, if you've got a system coded through LinkedIn accurately, that is a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you're not having a sick day. They're not on holiday. They're not on annual leave.
Yeah.
You know, you've systemized the whole process. So you're in front of a customer, you're pulling the job, you're creating the job. Before you know it, the system's already gone out. Before all your competition have hit the fucking phones and they're like, oh, fucking geezer. You're already out having a conversation to get 5 people covered off.
Because that is probably one of the I
that's the limitation of being on your own.
Yeah, of starting a business. You're one of one, then you become 2. You're slowly building. You don't want to hire for the sake of a bum on a seat because you don't want to saturate your service offering and become like other businesses in your market that possibly have gone down that avenue, which you then use to your advantage. You know, but again, it's, you know, for me, it's not about building the biggest, it's about building the most profitable. Yeah. And it's also about finding the best people.
Yeah, it's high quality
because that is, you know, Huntsman, one of the oldest tailors on Savile Row is the name. Right?
Is that where it comes from?
You know, that's one of the reasonings behind the name. You know, when we offer a service to a client, it is very bespoke. You know, we're not just sifting loads of CVs over around the market, doing the old chuck enough against the wall and some of it will stick. It's very, very high level.
Is it a client-led market?
You know, both. It's equally split because fundamentally it's what service am I getting from the recruiter and how are they working in my best interest?
But can you take a candidate, you get a good candidate and you're like, I'll place them, or is it more I have to have a job?
No, I will place them.
So if you get a good candidate, even if there's no vacancies, people...
Someone will take them on because we're in a very, very short talent market in construction on the whole. You know, university numbers have been going down the last couple of years in terms of construction and real estate degrees. We've obviously had impact of Brexit, impact of COVID. We've had booms in Saudi and Dubai where the money's just been obscene, where a lot of younger professionals are now taking their families to go and work, which was never what it was when I first got into this industry, you'd usually get the odd person coming back from Saudi who, was in the latter stages of their career wanting to come back to the UK. It's created a problem. So the value that we now have as recruitment, recruiters in the sectors that we work within is these companies need us more now than they've ever needed that support to their business. It's how you become consistent with the delivery to those clients, because if you're a one and done, that's no good. You can't build a business off of that. If you're able to then look at the business and go, we're doing a really good job in this part, what other areas are you spending a lot of money on in terms of recruitment fees? Right, well, we're doing it in this discipline, quantity surveying or building surveying or development monitoring, development management, whatever the discipline might be. That's an area that we want to then deliver for the client, because we've already proven ourselves terms of they know how we operate.
Would you want to be like oversight of clients eventually, and making sure that there's enough coming into each area?
It's funny, I spoke to a guy yesterday who was a chief commercial officer for a very, very well-known, long-standing building consultancy, and he explained his role to me, and his role was very much that, responsible for all the client relationship, understanding how those businesses function. They now have 28 service streams that they have within their business, that they then look at each sector, from industrial, residential, commercial, public sector, private sector, whatever it might be. How do we get all 28 services delivering for that client? Right, well, you've got 28 service streams. That's 28 desks that we could have to service the talent funnel to your business to help you grow. Mm-hmm. The other bit to it is just understanding who they are and where they position themselves in a market and what makes them attractive. So the whole point of the fundamentals of what we're trying to do, in the business, is a very, very bespoke service to a candidate and to a client, where when they get a CV, they know it's been vetted, they know we've met the candidate, they know that they're dealing with people on the phone that are experienced enough to do a good level of pre-vetting before they meet somebody, and our CV to interview ratio is like 95% of CV we send out is a first stage interview, because the clients trust us. They know we're not going to send over someone that's not right.
Yeah.
And that's going to allow us to grow and build and scale to the point where I then go, can we replicate this in the US? Can I replicate this in Europe? Can I do this out in APAC? Have I got to that point yet? No, because I'm 9 months into starting a business. But once you've got the model and the blueprint of how it works, very easy to replicate it, because it's all about service delivery.
But it is about getting the people that believe in the same way you work.
Yeah.
Who, the Huntsman, I love that vision of, oldest tailor, quality service, but there's not as many people like you.
No.
They don't exist. But especially if, I think the only way is that partner model, because if they're coming in as employees, a lot of them are just going to take the paycheck and just fucking go with the motions.
But also then there's the risk that you train those people up and they go and do what I've done.
So you've got to make them partners so they don't need to go.
My argument to that is I'll probably back them to go and start their own business and have a piece of the pie.
But isn't that what the partner network is, though?
Well, that's it.
Are they going to make enough? Have they got a big enough skin in the game for it to actually, they don't leave?
Potentially, dependent on...
I think that's where you've got to concentrate.
I think it depends potentially on how we structure that model, because there's a share of the entire group versus a share of your discipline within the group.
You could have both.
And that then comes with time, that if you've done a very good job...
You've got to create something, genuinely. That
I've got the model. There is a model out there.
Well, but the model has to be, and you don't have to talk about it if you don't want yet. We'll get you on to talk about it.
It's not finalised.
But the bit that you've got to work out is, how do you avoid what you just said?
Yeah, of course.
There's no point in building all this fucking effort and then they go and start their own.
100% agree.
We know we've all done this, so we know it consistently.
It's getting the buy-in. It's people understand. Look, you've got to build a level of trust. It was like me when I first entered into Archer, before I came into this world of being your own, own boss and your own business, etc. I wasn't ready at the time. Was I a bit naive looking back on things? Probably, because I should have asked those sorts of questions. But it was, someone's giving me an opportunity. Someone else is paying for me to learn. because I'm going to go and set this up for someone, and I'm getting the luxury of, you know, fairly decent base salary, etc., so I can live. But yeah, for me now, it's taking that lesson learned of, well, if I was in my shoes going back 6-7 years ago when I first joined Archer, and what advice would I give that version of me then? It would have been, you need to know more about this business before you're stepping into it.
I was the same. I mean, I ran a business I ran a contract side of a business where the guy, and I love the guys, but he said, I think we had 150 runners, and he was like, I want this to be 400 and you're going to run it and all this. And I was like, cool, what's in it for me? He's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, what's in it for me? And he couldn't explain.
And I bet it was, Sean, you're making loads of money.
Yeah, it was basically, well, imagine how much, but he just couldn't articulate that. And I was like, I get where you're going with this, and I see the vehicle's exciting, but you've not bought me into anything. You've not gone.
But
there's no buy in it.
It's a bit of. I know it's going to sound horrible. It actually, to me, I look at it and I go, it's a bit like exploitation of young people that are doing well, because
28 years old.
They haven't got that arm round them going, you should be thinking about a bigger picture, or this is what we're going to do to make sure we're going to secure our. You know, it's naivety from businesses of going, how are we going to make sure we secure our best assets, who are our people, who might not necessarily all be the top billers in a company, but the people that are the spine. And we had that oyster when I was there. You know, if I look at Richard Harris, gone and set up his own business. I've gone and set up my own business. Karam Kang's got his own business. Jake's got his own business. There's a lot of us that have gone away and gone and set up our own companies, because there are lots of parts of that business that were fantastic when we were there, when it was fairly small, sub 20 people, that, you know, it was real high energy. It was, you know, work hard, play hard, but everyone had that sort of mutual respect for each other of like, we're all pretty good at what we do. Look at that business now, and no disrespect to them, all of the top leaders have gone. And I think also more and more people in today's day and age are thinking about, I want to be my own boss. I want to go and set up my own company. Not everyone's going to make it successful.
Yeah.
Right? But more and more people are now going, do you know what? What have I got to lose? Because my viewpoint on it, amongst friends who have also gone and set their own businesses, not in recruitment, is like, well, worst case scenario, you take a year's worth of experience, it all goes down the pan, and you go and get employed by someone else. And mate, that's the risk.
Genuinely, like, right? Everyone...
There's like no... there's such a small risk to it. You've got to go and do it.
Yeah.
Try.
Yeah. Everyone I speak to says the same thing. Like, what's the worst that can happen?
You know, what's the worst that can happen? It's the not trying and the not taking that first step out of the box to go, I'm going to go and do this. That's the bit where you let yourself down. You know, and I wouldn't have been able to have respected myself fully had I have not made that decision.
Right, my final question then is...
Go on then.
What does your wife think now? Because she's the boss, and she told you to fucking do it.
What does she think? I mean, look, she's happy. You know, she is my absolute rock in the sense of she understands me. She understands the stresses of it. Completely polar opposite thinker. So I will ask her things about the business where she might not even have any context, but she'll think in a completely different way.
Yeah, my wife
to me, which is great, because you need balance. You know, but at the same time, she's always been there. You know, when you know you walk around you walk around your house, you're going, oh, got no bloody candidates. Got no candidate. Got all these jobs, got no candidates. James, if I had £1 for every time I'd heard this, we'd be living in probably a £3 million house somewhere. Or it's like, I've got all these bloody candidates, got no jobs.
Yeah.
No one's hiring, and I'm like, she's like, James, you've been saying this for 10 years. You know, that's recruitment. You know, you're going to get frustrated by these things, but, you know, you just got to do what you do. You know, you're good at what you do, back yourself, believe in yourself, and just go and execute it. And, you know, do things the right way. Has always been her sort of way of looking at things is, you know, don't try and do things way above where you should be, because you don't need to.
No.
You know, don't put yourself under stupid amounts of pressure, because, again, that's where you start to make mistakes. You know, and also I'm fortunate that I've done this at a point in life that I am still fairly young, you know, where I can take a little bit more time to grow something and grow it in the right way, because I've seen people in businesses outside of recruitment and inside recruitment do it the wrong way, try and scale super quick and then bang, you hit a downturn. They've got no capital behind them left in the bank. All the money's been spent. And it's like you've left yourself in a ridiculously poor position. You can't pay your staff. You're having to make redundancies. You know, you have to wrap your business up basically because you
Mate,
know,
I'll be
got
honest.
No cash,
whenever we sign clients now, and you can't always get it, but I go online my team do it. We just have a quick look at online. You can go to company's house. You can just go on like AI and just go, show me the financial results of this company. And the balance sheets are embarrassing of recruitment companies. Like there's fuck all money in most of them. And I'm like, what are you doing?
I to your, I can't remember the guy who called me originally, and I said, look, it's not about the cost, it's about the return on investment, but also when I've earmarked the capital to spend that money, that if it doesn't work, I've written it off in my head. Yeah. And that's how I make investment decisions for the business.
But we've always built, like, we've got £1 million in the bank and we'll never go below it. And we invest beyond that, right? And I just don't get why companies don't be more savvy with that. Like they live on the... In fact, if
guidance,
if COVID had hit,
and not having the right people around them.
If COVID would have hit a year earlier, we'd have been fucked. We'd have gone, or we'd have had to go and get some kind of investment because we had no cash back then. But the year before COVID, we got things right. We saved. We sold better. We got a better product, and then from then on, you know, we've never looked back. And I would implore everyone, you've got to focus on your balance sheet because things 100%. Will go up and down. You have to have cash capital.
It helps that I'm a bit obsessed with numbers and a bit OCD with it. But you have to be on top and you've got to be making business. And again, fortuitous from my side or circumstantial, I've grown up in an environment that's all very familiar to me. To people that haven't been around that is very alien. You know, and you've got a lot of sharks within our industry that are going, oh, I'll be a financial advisor. Oh, you need this bit of technology. Oh, you need this. The amount of sales calls that I'm having to just go away. Not interested.
But this
There's
is what
no
I'm saying.
value add. It's a real daunting place for new entrants into the recruitment world that haven't been involved in running a business or been, you know, in that circle, because you will get fleeced.
But do you not think that this is what I'm saying about, I'm all in on AI this year. I'm obviously all in on brand.
Yeah.
But I think the combination of sales, AI and brand, when you're missing one of them, you'll do well. But AI without brand, I think, is just so difficult. Sales without brand is so difficult. Yeah. Think about it. Like, I get messages every day. I'll automate this. I'll increase your revenue. I'll sort your finance. I'll do your FX. I ignore every fucking one of them. I spam the lot.
No,
if someone hits me where I recognise them, and I'm impressed by their persona online, I'll at least read it.
The one thing I would say is none of them pick the phone up.
Not anymore.
None of them. And I'm like, there you go. Right,
but if you've got a brand...
You're in sales.
But if you've got a brand and you pick the phone up, what an impact.
But you're in sales. Pick up the phone. Who are you? What's your business? Where are you going to bring value? And that is the fundamentals of any successful business. Is you have a problem, I can solve your problem, and that's how I'm going to solve your issue. And anyone in their right mind would listen and go, that sounds quite interesting. Like when we first started speaking, right, this is how I'm going to optimize LinkedIn for you. Great. What's it going to cost? Right, well, that's the equivalent of probably 2 people that I place in a year. That's a good investment piece for me because the return on investment could be minimum 5-10x my investment piece. And that's already proven because I've done it, I've sat there, I've applied it, and I've made more money than what I've spent.
Yeah.
So I've made money out of the exercise.
Yeah.
And I've learned. And I'm now going to encourage my staff to then adopt the same strategy.
Yeah.
And then it's how do you then go from there? And I think, you know, that's what good business should look like. Look, we can't always get it right all the time. But if your heart's in the right place and you're consistent with the message that you're trying to portray to your industry, to your candidates, to your clients, etc., people will buy into that. You know, it's not false. It is. I really enjoy the industry that I work in. You know, I walk in the city in the West End, and I see all these big buildings going up and projects being, you know, delivered, and I'm going, well, I'll place a director on that, or I've put in a project manager on that, or I know what they're going to be doing to this hotel over the next 3 years and how that's going to impact local area, and then taking it to public sector, like we started at the start of this conversation about the NHS and what impact that has on local community. You know, it's interesting. Am I from that background? Absolutely not. But I've made it my business to understand that industry. And I think, again, that passion side, you've got to be passionate about what you do. Otherwise, what's the point of doing it?
Agreed. James, we've run out of time, but thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being such an amazing client to work with. We've loved every interaction with you.
Cheers.
It's just the start of our relationship, I believe. We've got so much more we can achieve. If anyone's listened and wants to reach out to you about anything you spoke about and wants to just pick your brains, get some insights, maybe they're looking at starting a recruitment company, would like you're so in the thick of, you're in year one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, happy to have a chat.
Yeah, that's the bit that for
together
me is,
we are stronger. There's no doubt.
100% is just don't be afraid. If you don't know, pick the phone up. Speak to somebody because they've probably got the answer.
Yeah.
Don't sit on your hands and think, oh God, right, what do I do next? It's do get on the case with people that are a bit further ahead because they probably will be able to help you out.
Well, look, I wish the best of luck for everything over the next year or so. You're going to be back on the show, there's no doubt. I'm going to have a part 2 with Huntsman, find out where you are next, and good luck with it.
Cheers.
Top man.
Thanks very much.
Thank you as always for listening to today's show. I truly hope that you got value from it. Honestly, it's the only reason I take time every week to ensure that my audience, you guys, future and existing recruitment owners, you're learning from each other to make this industry that I love so much stronger. And today's episode is brought to you by my business, Hoxo. I'm the CEO and founder, and we're on a mission to help brand recruitment agencies and their people better. I want to help people have the tools to stand out in the most competitive markets in the world. So I'll see you again next week with another episode. Catch you soon.